Happy Monday. Today we're talking all about how to use a LinkedIn newsletter to grow your following. So more on that in a minute. How was your weekend? Kind of smacked my head on on the cabinet. So yeah, a little bit of a red mark there. I know it's already there. But how was your weekend besides that? We are already into March, which is hard to believe since it feels like yesterday when I was just setting New Year's goals for what I wanted to happen in 2023. And what's amazing is that the master plan I had in mind when we left Hawaii is all starting to fall into place for this year. So that's pretty exciting when you see things that were just ideas some months ago actually starting to take shape. You're like, okay, this is good. So I start my initial classes in a couple of weeks to work towards my second bachelor's degree. And it's funny how more than a decade out of school makes you feel actually excited about getting the opportunity to be a student again. So fun stuff. Now it is time for Mondays with Mindy. This is a weekly show on, you guessed it, Mondays, where I talk about all things LinkedIn profiles, promo, and pipeline, what I call the 3 Ps of LinkedIn. So, do you have questions about LinkedIn that you want me to answer? Be sure to like this post, whether you're watching live or from the replay. Leave your questions below, and I will answer them after the show or on a future episode of Mondays with Mindy. Let's get to today's topic. How do we actually create a LinkedIn newsletter? And is it still an effective way to reach your audience? So many of you have reached out and like, Mindy, is this LinkedIn newsletter thing actually a thing? We just talked about LinkedIn live shows. So we're kind of switching gears towards a LinkedIn newsletter. So many of you have reached out and like, I'm trying to figure out, is it worth using the LinkedIn newsletter feature? Does it actually build my brand? Will it actually drive leads for my business? So, content is king when it comes to just about every single online channel, but there are a lot of nuances when it does come to LinkedIn. You may have noticed this, and publishing good articles, or shall we call them newsletter editions, as LinkedIn calls them. I know. Many of you have either never heard of the LinkedIn newsletter feature or you've come across it and like, Mindy, everybody has a LinkedIn newsletter. Do I really need to hop on the newsletter wagon? So if you've ever thought that LinkedIn newsletters are dead, nobody's using them or everybody's using them, so why should I? Or that you're going to hurt your SEO by republishing content to LinkedIn. This is something that I've heard a lot. People are worried, like, is this going to affect SEO on my website? Can I republish content? Or I don't have any content to put up on LinkedIn. A lot of times that is usually not the case. Many people have more content than they realize. Or I'll just do a LinkedIn post instead because it's easier. It's shorter form content. Who has the time to read an actual article, anyways? Or my favorite, I just don't have the time. We don't have the time for the things that matter in our lives or the things we aren't quite sure are going to matter. So I think no matter where you fall on the spectrum with LinkedIn newsletters, maybe you have one, maybe you've started one, maybe you've thought about starting one, or maybe fallen off the wagon, or you're just curious what the possibilities are when it comes to newsletters. Let's talk about that today. We're going to talk about the benefits of LinkedIn newsletters. I'm going to show you a few examples. For me, I learn really well when I see examples because that actually shows me, that's what a newsletter is. Here are some examples. Here are some formats that I can follow. So I'm going to do a little bit of screen sharing a little later on. So you'll actually see some that are up and running and in action. So not too long ago, I put out a question to my email list asking what they wanted to learn about using LinkedIn to grow their presence. So Tim actually responded. Hi, Tim. And he said, I'd like to learn how to use the LinkedIn newsletter more effectively and get people outside of my immediate realm to read what I have to say. So I thought that was a really good question, good insight, good talking point, because as any of you who are regular viewers already know, I love to answer questions from listeners and readers. So if you have a question, send it to me because I likely will answer it on a Mondays with Mindy's show if I have not already done so. So hey there, for those who don't know me, my name is Mindy Rosser. I'm the founder of Mindy Rosser Marketing, and I have a program called the LinkedIn Accelerator for those who want to go from 0 to 60 on LinkedIn with their profile and their network. I help superstars who feel they are the best kept secret in their industry to become that go-to visible expert in their niche so they can get that next opportunity, grow their business, and scale their impact. In this live, we are going to talk about why not using the LinkedIn newsletter as part of your marketing strategy on LinkedIn is a huge missed opportunity and how you can easily start publishing in just 5 minutes per week and can potentially get up to 40% engagement per post. I know some of you are like, what? 40% engagement? That's crazy. Yes. And I'm going to share a story about that in a moment. So go ahead and like this post, whether you're live or watching from the replay, to give it some social love. So, one of my clients, whom I have been working with, I think it's more than 8 years now, it's a lifetime in internet years, he wanted to start a newsletter. So, he's like, "Ah, okay, I really want to start this LinkedIn newsletter." And it was before they were as popular as they are now. And I kind of convinced him. I was like, you know what? It's a really great way to use that content. By now, I think he has like a decade worth of content from his blog. He publishes every single week on his blog. So he's got a lot of content that he could actually mine for his LinkedIn newsletter. So the only way to get this feature, the new LinkedIn newsletter feature, you have to turn on LinkedIn creator mode. That wasn't a big deal. You just toggle it on. If you're not sure how to do this, just go to your LinkedIn profile, scroll down a little bit, and you're going to see my resources. You're going to see a section there that says creator mode. If it's grayed out, then you need to just toggle that on. So pretty simple to do, pretty straightforward. So we got it toggled on. And you have to leave it toggled on if you want to keep your newsletter privileges too. So for many years, I was actually a bit of a LinkedIn newsletter critic. And before it was called a newsletter, we referred to them as articles. LinkedIn had not significantly invested in their publishing platform at that time. So I was a little bit skeptical. I'm like, okay, I'm convincing you to start this LinkedIn newsletter. You're like, maybe, Mindy, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens here. So both of us were a little bit hesitant. Both of us were also a little bit excited because the potential was there. It's like, well, if we start this newsletter, then we can invite all of his connections, which he has, you know, 5 figures worth of connections, so a lot of connections. And why not? Why not? The worst that can happen is that crickets, right? Nothing happens. And that's okay. We'll just stop publishing. So we both had a little bit of hesitance around this, but we went ahead and did it anyways because on LinkedIn, his other content, like just sharing typical blog articles, sharing insights, sharing videos, all of that was performing okay. So it wasn't like we were trying to do the newsletter as our one shot to get attention. But we decided to start with republishing one article per week from his blog to the LinkedIn newsletter. Okay. And so we were 6 weeks in, and boom, like after publishing the first 6 articles, he was averaging a massive 40.42%. Yes, we measured it. Engagement rate on every single article. It was crazy. I'm like 40% engagement rate on articles. Like this is crazy. So that's unheard of when it comes to typical LinkedIn posts. If you're not familiar, you'll hope to get like a 2 to 3% engagement rate, which is really high for most people. Also depends on the size of your network, how aligned your audience is with your content, all of that good stuff. So there are a lot of factors that go into engagement rate, but this kept up for several months. Like that engagement rate stayed high, it's like still in the double digits. And I thought something must be off with the algorithm. I'm like, well, maybe we just got lucky. Maybe we just had a few good hits. What is going on here? So even though his engagement rate, it didn't continue at 40% forever, because more people are using LinkedIn newsletters these days. That's okay. But he continues to still post every single week to his newsletter, hovers in that double digits engagement rate range, and gets great feedback from his readers. So, this is a huge win over time when you're playing the long game on LinkedIn because each and every single edition builds trust with your readers. So, that is really the key. It's like, yes, the engagement rate is great. Yes, he had a lot of people reading it when he first went live with his newsletter and invited all of his new connections. And yes, it grew crazy fast over those first, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of growth there. Now it is kind of at more a steady pace, but it is sustainable. And it is a great way for people to learn about him, for him to stay engaged with his audience and to republish all of that great content. So, the power of going deeper with your content, the thing with LinkedIn newsletters, they are not easy to read. They aren't like clickbaity. You aren't trying to gamify your post. You're not trying to do a selfie or keep up on the latest LinkedIn algorithm changes to get into people's feeds. People subscribe to your newsletter because they believe in your content and they want to hear from you on a regular basis. I feel like that's the power of a newsletter. It's not like, I'll like your post if it catches my eye or I see it in my feed. With the newsletter, people that subscribe to your newsletter get notified. Some people actually get your newsletter delivered straight to their email inbox. So keep that in mind. It is really powerful. When people say, "Yes, I want to hear from you," that means they are interested in your content. It's a great signal. So when it comes to engaging with your followers, LinkedIn is where you do that. And you have to actually create a space for your community. And now, LinkedIn groups are not the best place to do that. But LinkedIn newsletters, I have found to actually be a really good substitute because when you share a topic that gets people talking, people start having conversations in the comments. People feel like they're surrounded by other people who understand and are engaged and interested in those topics. So do not underestimate the power of LinkedIn newsletters. So I actually have a newsletter edition article from 2017, like a long time ago, called Getting Started with LinkedIn Hashtags. And it still is going strong and continues to drive prospects my way. It's crazy. I've actually started and continued conversations with those who've come across my article and were outside of my immediate LinkedIn network because they found the article that I honestly totally forgot that I wrote all that time ago, years after it was published. So sometimes an article or a newsletter edition, whatever you want to call it, will kind of have that long tail effect or go viral for some of you who like to use that term. But LinkedIn newsletters, when done well, they have staying power. People come back to them for years in my case. And as also, I've worked with a number of other clients who have experienced something similar where somebody will kind of dig through the archive and start reading a lot of their posts and going, "Oh, you know what? I actually want to reach out to you and work with you. You have this history of publishing great content." So when done well, they have that staying power and they don't take that long to publish. When it comes to LinkedIn newsletters, you are not writing content directly for LinkedIn itself. Like you should have content. So if you don't have content yet, if you've never written a blog, you've never sent out an email, you probably don't want to start with a LinkedIn newsletter until you have a library of content somewhere else, because that library of content is what you will use to just republish that content to LinkedIn. So I usually don't tell people, "Oh, create original content for LinkedIn newsletters." I see it more as a place to republish content that you have already written. You may do a little bit of tweaking to the format to actually make it fit the platform better or fit your audience better, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel when it comes to content. So I do want to make that clear. There really is no excuse. If you have a stash of content somewhere and you aren't using it, republish it here on LinkedIn, especially if it is not, time sensitive stuff that is outdated, but content that is evergreen. So stop prioritizing and going for that short term buzz you get from a popular LinkedIn post that took you 2 minutes to write. Start thinking about the long term value of your brand and how your best long form content can continue to perform long after you have actually moved on to other topics. So the power of LinkedIn newsletters, first of all, staying power. Second, it helps your audience go deeper and really learn about you. Third, it creates community. So people, when they come here, they feel like, oh, even if they come many months later after you have put the post, they still will read people's comments and respond to people. It's really interesting to see. So we are actually going to take a look at some newsletters because before we get into the actual steps to start a newsletter, it's pretty simple. I want to show you some examples because I feel like examples are so powerful. So we are going to share screens and you should be able to see it momentarily. All right, I'm tiny now, and there we go. All right, so this is my newsletter. It is called The Mango Effect. And that actually is the same title as my podcast. So that's where the title came from. I'm not going to go into why I called it that and all that, but it is a very catchy name. You can also see there's mangoes in the picture. There's me looking at mangoes. So you can see that it's kind of emphasizing what the content is about. You'll also see that I have 64 editions. So editions is kind of the other term for articles. That means I've been here for a long time, publishing for a very long time. Now, if you see how many subscribers I have about 1,754. It does not go up significantly anymore because I have invited all of my connections to actually subscribe to the newsletter if they wanted to. And then sometimes people come and follow and unfollow, so that number will kind of fluctuate a little bit from week to week, but it's pretty steady. Am I obsessed and trying to grow this as big as possible? No. A lot of this content is also, well, all of this content is also getting sent out to my email list. So it's staggered. So it goes out at a different time and place. But what this does is for those people who only follow me on LinkedIn, they get the same exact content that people who follow me on other channels, whether you're watching this live and you like the live streams or whether you like my newsletter, my email newsletter, people can consume that same content across platforms. So that's how I see it. I'm not going for the biggest numbers here. I don't really care. It's really about the people who resonate with my message and who really want to follow my content deeper. And I'm happy with that number. So I'm not obsessively trying to grow this per se, although I could. If I really wanted to, there are some ways I could actually spike the growth a little bit, which I will talk about shortly. All right, so let's take a look at the next one here. So this is the Marketing Minute. You see a lot of subscribers, right? I've been following Josh Turner's newsletter for years, like several years. And I always see him pop in my feed. He used to get delivered to my email inbox when I was getting all my newsletters in my email, but I had to shut that down because I was getting so many. So I read it just on LinkedIn. But I think Josh does a great job. You can see 211 editions. He's been publishing for a very long time. Now, if we actually open, I do want to show you a good format for newsletters. So if you actually open the newsletter, you'll see, okay, there's the title. He always uses like a very similar image at the top. It's branded, so you can change that image out. I like different images here, but he likes his like this. And then what I really like is he has like this little intro here and said, okay, let's get started. And this copy repeats week to week. So thanks for reading. Want to stay in the know, subscribe to this series. Here's what we're going to talk about. And then the article here. Okay. Very simple format to follow. And I really, really like the way that he's done it and the way that he has stayed so consistent, which is very, very impressive. All right. So let's hop over to Running Remote. I think you can see that now. Okay, great. So Running Remote, they are relatively new. So you can see only 9 editions. But what I like about theirs is you can see that this is coming from their LinkedIn page. So if you're like Mindy, I don't want to publish it from my profile. I want to publish it from the company page. You can do that, which is great. Too few companies are taking advantage of this. And what I like about Running Remote is they do take advantage of this. You can see how many followers they have as well. That's the page followers. So that's 6680. That's how many people are following their LinkedIn page. Then you can see how many people are actually subscribed to their newsletter from their page. So when they publish, this also goes out to their LinkedIn company page so people can read the articles and engage with them there. So it's a relatively new newsletter, but it has great content. If you are really interested in remote work topics, you can see like curated list of articles, and it kind of links you to a lot of other different places and where you can learn more about those topics. And you can see like they also promote their own stuff at the bottom. Okay. That's another example of a really good newsletter. I'll show you one more. All right. So this is the Art and Science of Complex Sales. Excellent podcast. Excellent newsletter. If you like B2B sales topics, really, really good stuff. So this comes out from George Bronson from Membrane, and it's a really, really good, thoughtful, like really, really thoughtful post. You can see like there's a pretty high number of engagement on his posts and comments. So you can see like, look at all of these discussions. So this is what we're talking about. This is creating community. When you publish a piece of content and you get this many back and forth, and you can see the author, George, is actually responding to everyone, which keeps the conversation going, which gives it that long tail effect. So you can see, I was like, okay, that was a lot of comments, but also a lot of really thoughtful, I wouldn't say heartfelt discussion, but really, really good, juicy discussion. You can see here, 52 editions. Okay. So George is obviously publishing on a regular basis. And also, if you want to look at his format, it's pretty good as well. Let's just take a peek here. You can see there's very similar to like what Josh had on his, where there's like this little intro area. Here's what the newsletter is about. Here's my mission. Now on to the topic. It's really good to include this at the beginning of your newsletters, just so people understand what your newsletter is about and they know whether or not they want to follow you and why they should follow you and subscribe to the newsletter. Okay. All right, so those are some really good examples. Highly recommend just kind of checking them out. Also, if you may have come across other people in your space that have really good newsletters, so see what they're doing. You don't want to copycat them, obviously, but a lot of times people have formats that they use from a week to week basis and just kind of over time. Most people keep those pretty consistent on LinkedIn, but there are some people who experiment with formats. So check out other people's newsletters and see what you think of theirs as well. So if you're like, Mindy, this is great. How do I actually start publishing to LinkedIn? I want to start a newsletter to build a following. So let's talk about 5 things that you can do to start building that newsletter. First of all, look through all of the content you've already written. We talked about this. So do you have blogs? Do you have articles? Do you have guest posts? Maybe you've written thoughtful emails. Maybe you have tutorials. Maybe you have videos or a YouTube channel. Maybe you have a book. and you have excerpts from the book that you could use. So really think through all the content that you have, and that's what you're going to use as like your starting point. And that will also tell you and kind of dictate the frequency. Like, how often do you want to publish your newsletter? Do you want to publish it weekly? Do you want to publish it monthly? Is this a collection or curation of other people's content, kind of like running remotes? Or is this more of like a thought leadership piece? Thought leadership works really, really well on LinkedIn. So keep that in mind. If you have some really good, thoughtful pieces of content, this is the place to share them. All right, number two, you want to build LinkedIn newsletter publishing into your weekly content marketing process. So if weekly is too ambitious, then start with once per month. So, like I said, go back through all of that content that you have, figure out how often you want to post based on, like, if you have a big library of content, you could publish every week and it'd be pretty simple and straightforward to do. If you're just getting started or your business is relatively new or you kind of pivoted your topics, then maybe you want to publish monthly until you have a lot of content that you can repurpose. All right, so third, you want to republish the articles to your LinkedIn newsletter on the same day each week or on the same day of the month each month. So really set a strong cadence. Like an important thing to do with LinkedIn newsletters is to have a cadence. A lot of people kind of just publish when they feel like it, and that does not create the consistency that you want. So in my case, how I do my newsletter, really, really simple, is I do this live on Mondays. And then on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, this live goes out as a LinkedIn newsletter. So for those people who like to read and scan, they get to read like the written version of what we're talking about today. For those people who like to view, they will probably watch the live stream. I embed the video of the live stream into the LinkedIn newsletter. Boom, done. So for one piece of content that I created, it's going out in multiple ways. And then that same piece of content will go out to my email list on a different day. So keep in mind that this is a way to create content and people will feel like, wow, you're everywhere. You're always publishing. When really it's one piece of content that's just kind of showing up in different ways for different people. So figure out what cadence you want to stick with, what frequency, so people know when to expect your LinkedIn newsletter. All right, number four, you're going to automatically be sharing a LinkedIn post on LinkedIn whenever you publish your newsletter. But you can also drive targeted traffic to the post from your email newsletter, other social channels, or by DMing a few friendlies on LinkedIn to get the conversation started. So, again, traffic. Where is your traffic coming from? If you don't have very many connections on LinkedIn, you definitely want to start growing your connections because as you grow your connections, people are going to start seeing your content. Your new connections are going to see like your first post, your first LinkedIn post right after they connect with you. And that's an opportunity, if it's a LinkedIn newsletter, for them to subscribe. So keep in mind that as your network grows, your newsletter can grow along with it. And if you really want to grow your newsletter in particular, then you have to be active. You have to figure out, okay, you got to nail your frequency. You got to nail the content and the topics that you talk about. And you need to figure out where your traffic is coming from. How are you going to grow your subscribers? So maybe if you have a really big email list, then you promote your LinkedIn newsletter, kind of cross promote things. If you have a podcast with a good listenership, then maybe you are talking like, hey, if you want to hear more about this or see the written version of what we talked about today, go check out my LinkedIn newsletter. So you have to think through your traffic strategies because if you do not, your LinkedIn newsletter will just kind of hum along, and that's fine if you want it to grow organically. But when you do want it to grow aggressively, you will have to drive traffic to it. Okay. All right. And then number five, start being consistent with your posting. I know everybody talks about consistency, but that is really the key to continued success. A lot of people start LinkedIn newsletters, but most of them don't publish. So the funny thing is, when I get invited to subscribe to somebody's newsletter, depending on the person, depending on the topic, I will usually accept it. And I will say, oh, okay, that's fine, sure. But you know what? Like, I would say probably 10% of the people that I have accepted their newsletter invitation to subscribe actually publish. The other 90%, I'm like, I never see them again. I never see their content. Past that first edition, I'm like, did they ever publish? Or maybe I'm missing it. But no, LinkedIn notifies you every single time they publish. So it is interesting. The people who stand out are the people who keep showing up. And so if you keep showing up, you may not hit it on the first time. You may not publish 6 LinkedIn newsletters and then have 40% engagement rate. Don't expect that out of the gate, but just continue to show up week over week and you will start building that tribe. You'll start building that community and that conversation. But you do have to publish quality content. A lot of people don't know what quality content is, or they're still figuring it out. And so they struggle at the beginning. So once you kind of solidify your voice online and you start figuring out what that quality content is for you, how you can generate that and really connect with people, you're going to notice that your LinkedIn newsletter grows and people actually engage and follow it. And what's funny too is sometimes months later, people will reach back out and say, I've been reading your newsletter or following your lives for a while, and I finally am ready to work on LinkedIn with you. These are things that I hear a lot from people because they kind of don't say anything. So you may not see them. You don't see all the people sitting there reading your articles. You just see that number. And so sometimes you forget that behind that number, there are actual humans and there are actual people who look forward to reading your newsletter and getting some inspiration or motivation or some wisdom or some tips and tricks that will actually help them do their job better. So make sure you continue to show up for your people. It matters a lot. Like today, just being honest, today when I'm recording this, you know what? It was definitely a challenging week. There was a lot going on. I didn't feel like doing it, but you know what? You show up. You always show up because you are consistent and you care about your people. And that's what sets you apart from other people in the space. So show up, show up, show up. That is the key to success with LinkedIn newsletters. So this is not a short-term strategy, but what the newsletter feature does give you is the ability to build a massive following. Like you saw with Josh Turner, he did not build that overnight. I have been getting his newsletter for several years. So he built up that newsletter over years. So if you are in it to win it, you have to keep showing up for the long term. So get that newsletter started. It's not that hard to do. I didn't go into a tutorial, but if you need help actually setting up the newsletter, just shoot me a DM. I will share with you just a very short Loom video that is like a little tutorial that shows you how to set it up. So say, Mindy, I want the tutorial to learn how to set up a LinkedIn newsletter. I'm curious. And I will be happy to share that with you and get people subscribing. Drive traffic, take it to the next level. So this is something that you can really focus on now that is working in 2023 to go deeper, share that quality content, and use that library that you already have. All right, so we're going to wrap it there. But do you want to pick my brain and get some feedback from others who are also learning how to use LinkedIn effectively to increase revenue and build thought leadership? Join my Facebook group. It is called Master LinkedIn Now to grow your business. So I will share the link in the comments. So you'll have that. I know it's odd, right? It's a Facebook group about all things LinkedIn, but Facebook just does groups better. So there we are talking about LinkedIn and strategies. It is filled with others that are B2B professionals, a good number of entrepreneurs, business owners who are all passionate about using LinkedIn the right way. Good people doing good business. So I will share that link below and you can hop over there and join us in some conversations. If you have questions, that's also a really good place to post them because other people can jump in. I check it every day too, so I can answer your questions there as well. So I will see you all next week on Mondays with Mindy. Feel free to leave any questions or comments below. My inbox is open if you want to message me directly. All right, that's it for this week. I will see you then. Bye for now.